Hello, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of Miami Living with Levi. Today, we have a very special guest, the Miami-Dade County Commissioner, Raquel Regalado for District 7.
Nice to meet you. It's a
Nice.
pleasure.
Nice. Thank you for coming here. So today we are going to talk about a variety of topics that are pertinent to the Miami-Dade County and just in general Miami living. Just to give you a quick overview of some of those, we're going to talk about the Coconut Grove Playhouse and what's going on with the process of getting that open and active again. We'll be talking about the 40-year recertification in a post-Surfside collapse world and how that relates to condo owners and future buyers of people that plan to live in Miami. We're going to be talking about septic to sewer conversions, which is a really interesting topic because some parts of Miami are on septic tanks, some are on city or county sewer. So we'll be talking about the process for septic to sewer conversion. We'll be talking a little bit about the Rickenbacker Causeway and the RFP process for the P3. And we'll be talking about the redistricting maps of the county commissioner zone. So I think after the most recent census, it looks like we're going to be rezoning those. So just touching up a little bit on those. So that will be the beginning of our show. And again, thank you, Commissioner, for coming. We know you have a very busy schedule, and it's a pleasure to have you on the show. First, let's start real quick. Most people who are watching the show know a little bit about me, but I grew up here in Miami. I'm one of 10 children to an Orthodox Jewish family. I grew up on Miami Beach. I've lived in Sunny Isles and North Miami Beach. I've lived in horse country. I've lived in Miami Shores, downtown in Brickell, and 6 years in Coconut Grove. And now I'm a Coral Gables resident. So I'm actually a resident of your district. And I sell real estate. That's I work with a company called Compass, and we have a national network of 25,000 agents, many of which are watching this show today, and often forward and refer their clients to us here in Miami. So we try to give them a really good finger to the pulse of what's happening here in Miami and topics that are pertinent to future buyers and future residents of our great county. Tell us, I guess, quickly a little bit about yourself.
Me. Cool. So I'm a Miami.
Maybe something nobody knows.
Okay, I'm a Miami native. So I was born and raised in Miami. Wow. I'm actually the first native Miami Hispanic to be elected, woman to be elected to the county commission. So that's interesting. I do Spanish language radio, so a lot of people ask me like when I came to Miami, but I was actually born here, and I've lived in District 7 my entire life. So I've actually lived in the area that I serve for 47 years, right? I actually grew up in the district. I went to St. Peter and Paul. I went to Jesu first, which was one of the few, schools that was bilingual. I didn't learn to speak English until I was 6.
Really?
Yeah. So even though I was born here, my parents decided that, they weren't going to teach us English as some sort of experiment, which is interesting because my father came here during Peter Pan. So my father lived in the United States since he was 11. And my mother lived here since she was 12. And she actually went to Biscayne College. So most people think like I didn't learn English because my parents didn't speak English. Not true.
It's a conscious decision.
Exactly. They decided that they wanted us to speak Spanish. So
you essentially learned it in school.
My mother dropped me off, and this is something most people don't know, the first day at like St. Peter and Paul. And I remember she ripped off the back of it was the 70s Dunhill box, because everyone smoked then. And she wrote restroom on it. And then in Spanish, she said, if you have to go to the bathroom, give this to the teacher. And like literally like scooted me off. And I was there with my little backpack, like, what? And I remember this tremendous.
Raising your hand and
I mean,
I
didn't understand a word that anyone was saying. No one spoke Spanish. And I remember feeling this tremendous amount of shame that I didn't know English when I figured out that, everyone that was born here knew how to speak English. So I actually learned to speak English in record time, under 6 months. And I became obsessed with idioms and all things like Americana. Because I wanted to feel like more American. So my parents actually did themselves a disservice by making my brother and I obsessed with all things American.
We want what we can't have.
Exactly. But it was a very different Miami. I was actually in a part of my district earlier this week talking about Kendall Drive. When I was a kid, I remember when they put the extra on Kendall Drive. Like I remember where Miami-Dade County ended in Kendall Drive. Like there was nothing out there. It was just orange fields. I remember when they bought the area of Metro Zoo and we were like, who's going to go out there? When I grew up, the nearest restaurant to where I live, which at that time, it's actually the same area where I live now, which is near Coconut Grove, was a Howard Johnson's. It was on South Dixie. I don't know if you remember, there's like a Howard Johnson on South Dixie. That was the nearest restaurant. And it was a very small kind of, everybody left their doors open, rode your bike around town kind of Miami. So that's the Miami that I grew up in. Went to school here. I'm an attorney, was a school board member, and now you're a county commissioner.
Awesome. And family life?
So I got married in law school, had 2 kids, Isabella and Sebastian. My children are now 16. Isabella's 18 and Sebastian's 16. So I am the parent of 2 teenagers.
Almost out of the house.
I don't think they're going, but that's them. I actually ran for a position on the school board because both of my children were diagnosed with autism. And that was one of the reasons that I went to the school district. My daughter is like mid-spectrum, but she's doing great. She goes to the Easter Seals culinary program and she loves it. And my son is higher functioning and he goes to Southwest and he wants to be an architect. And they love Miami like I do. So now obviously my father was the mayor of the city of Miami, was a commissioner before that. I grew up in a radio station. And when my mother passed away, I'm an attorney by trade and I continue to practice as an attorney. But when my mother passed away, she had done this radio show for 30 years and I started doing it. And then one day led to another. And that was 13 years ago. Oh, wow. So I do a daily radio show from 9 to 12.
We have a lot more experience in it than I do, but I've done a few. I've interviewed Ken Russell and I've interviewed Alex Horn. I've interviewed Jay Glazer and several others, and we're hoping to interview Mayor Suarez shortly. But it's a pleasure to have you here. I am so it's always hard for me to say. I like to say I'm a Miami native, but technically I was born in California in Los Angeles.
After 10 years, you're a native.
There you go. I say 5. But I've been here my entire life. My mother, however, was born and raised in Miami. She grew up. She actually lived out in Westchester for years. She grew up on the beach in her later teens. She spent a lot of time in the roads.
So St. Peter and Paul is.
My great uncle was my great uncle was a developer in the roads, and he built a lot of houses over there. But my mother has childhood memories of riding her bike from the road straight to the bay before the 95 came down, before there were buildings there. And
okay, my age may be near your mother, but we'll say this. I actually learned to ride my bike and roller skate on Brickell. Because that was, when you lived around the roads area, your parents would tell you, like, stay off Coral Way. There's too many cars. By the way, Coral Way was residential. It had duplexes and triplexes. It didn't have commercial spaces. It was just duplexes and triplexes. But it was considered a busy street. So we would take the back roads to Brickell because Brickell was only about 4 buildings and a lot of mangroves. And the only thing with riding your bike, on Brickell, you would see a lot of other kids riding their bikes and their roller skates, but there were no lights. So at around like 6 o'clock, you had to kind of go because it got really dark really fast.
Well, Miami has come a long way since then, and it's actually it's come a long way even since I've gotten in real estate almost just about 10 years ago. Going on my 10th year soon, and I think we're it seems we're in this almost rebirth process right now where a lot is changing in Miami. If you look at what's going on downtown with the new expansion of the 836 and that beautiful bridge that's going to be there
and the park that will go underneath it.
Yeah, with the Underline, with Miami, with World Center, with Brightline, with transportation coming. So we've seen a huge influx of buyers coming from the Northeast, from New York, from DC and Boston, and we're starting to see a lot of buyers coming to Miami from California. And so one of the topics I think we'll talk on is, and it's a concern that I've heard from a lot of people is it safe to live in buildings and what's happening with the 40 recertification. So I definitely want to touch on that. But if you don't mind, I want to start just because it's really, I guess, maybe selfish, but it's close to home for me. I spent the last 6 years living in Coconut Grove, and I just recently bought a house in Coral Gables. But I like to say it's on the border because there's Merry Christmas Park off of Lejeune, north of the Cocoa Plum Circle, and I'm about a half a block west of Lejeune. So if I could take my kids to Merry Christmas Park in under 2 minutes by foot, and I'm back in the Grove, but I get some of the benefits of living in Coral Gables, so I'm getting the best of both worlds. But the Grove Playhouse, it's a historic playhouse that's I think it's almost 100 years ago that it was built.
We're coming up on its anniversary soon.
And so in my recollection of Coconut Grove, my mother has different memories of the Grove Playhouse, but it's been an abandoned building, and it's been a very contentious point politically of what exactly will happen with it. Everybody has various different opinions. I know that this week you had a Zoom call with the mayor of Miami-Dade County and with some of the parties involved, including Architectonica, who's helping in the architectural redesign. And so I just wanted to get an update from you on what is going to happen over there. I am of the opinion that whether it's 300 or 1,000 or however it is, I just want to see it open,
Right.
In my day as soon as possible. But I'm curious to know what, from your perspective, what's the latest update after the meeting you guys had last week?
Well, the meeting was so the meeting was important because we unveiled the changes that we've made since I got elected. So my history with the Playhouse goes way back. I actually assisted different events at the Playhouse, but it was closed 15 years ago. So it's been shuttered for 15 years. When I became a school board member, as part of my duties as a school board member, I was a member of the board that oversaw the Playhouse. And as a result, I had a front row seat to the transfer of the Playhouse. And I think that's important because a lot of people just don't understand. The Playhouse was transferred to the state of Florida. And then Miami-Dade County signed a lease based on a program to renovate the historic front of the Playhouse and demolish the additions in the back, which was very contentious. I myself supported a plan that wanted to keep all of it before I became elected. And one of the first things that I did when I became elected was go to the lease, go to the physical building and see what can be done. So the problem is, first, this idea that it's just a facade is not true. It's an actual building. And actually, Grant Miller went with me and we showed him. We did a video. We did a
Miami
video,
Community Newspapers video with Grant Miller
inside the Playhouse.
Which was very brave of you. It looked
it's
dark
a scary
and
place. Yeah, there's some friends too on the floor. They didn't make the video, but they were there with us. So it is the original building that we're keeping. The part that needs to be demolished and will be redone, we're keeping a lot of the elements and we're taking them out and putting them back in the new building. I'm glad that we're having this conversation post Surfside because there are concerns about the structural integrity, right? And one of the things that I want to prevent is demolition by neglect. And if we continue kind of pushing this off and pushing this off and pushing this off, there'll be no Playhouse to restore.
Sooner or later, there'll be nothing left to save.
Right. Yeah. That's just the reality of it. So, I went back and I tried to see within the lease, what could we change? Because if we make changes to the lease, we have to go back to the state of Florida. That means a meeting before the governor and his cabinet to change the lease terms. A lot of people think, oh, the county just wants to do like the easy thing. This was negotiated years ago. And we've actually already been in this lease with the state of Florida for over 6 years. So, politically speaking, it's very difficult to return to the state 6 years after the fact, still in litigation with the city, still haven't done anything to say, oh, about those terms. We would like to radically change this, and do something very, very different. So that's something that, I don't think is going to work. Also, the neighborhood has changed, that I don't think the neighborhood, well, I know because we met with the neighborhood doesn't want 1,000 people there. The neighbors understand that it would dramatically, impact the way that they live their lives. And one of the things that this plan does is open up the area of the Grove to the West Grove and to the neighborhood. So if you see the plan, it has walkways, it has promenades, it has open spaces, it has a pocket park that I added to the back. We're going to have an MOU with Baby Tucker, with Carver and Baby Carver and Tucker, so that the kids can come and we can have, a space where they can participate because the Grove schools really don't get to do that. We also reached out and met with the schools across the street, and they're going to have access to the parking. The parking is the biggest thing. The parking lot cannot be more than 320 spaces. That's what we got approval for. So when you talk about adding more seats, you're going to still have those spaces. And I don't think a lot of people understand that. So if you say 1,000 seats, 320 spaces, 700 seats, 320 spaces, 300 seats, 320 spaces. So that's something that has been very concerning for the neighbors. We did modify the retail spaces so that we can do pop-ups, and that's we can rent the space, and so that we can do different things. And we've also been working with the Miami Parking Authority to work on different amenities and how we can make this a space that has utility, long term. So Gable Stage, we're working with them. We're going to actually be having a second meeting where we're going to be talking about what we want to put on the stage of the Playhouse, what the educational programs are going to look like, and so that people can hear directly from the people that have committed to doing that work. So what we saw this week was just kind of the beginning. We had our historic architect kind of explain what he's salvaging, what's historic, what's going to be restored, what's it going to look like, and then the changes that we made within the confines of the lease. Some of them, I think, are very thoughtful, the pocket park being one of them. The other one is we changed the back of it so that it looks like the old Fly Tower, which is something that I did when we renovated Miami High. So we really tried to bring a lot of different elements in. But this is just the beginning. We're going to have several other.
So what does that
events.
what does that process look like in short? And is this
Well,
so this is sort of the first step? Is this, are we approved for this and it's moving forward and it's just a matter of
This is approved. It's shovel ready. The only thing that we're waiting on is we're being held up by the litigation with the city of Miami, which is at its end. We have funding from the Knight Foundation. They've told us that if we cannot get this off the ground, in terms of applying for our permits before the end of the year, they're going to take that funding and give it to another organization because it's been sitting at the Playhouse for a very long time, and then the county has to decide also, what are we going to do? If we can't resolve this litigation with the city, do we just give it back to the state? If so, if we get to that point, I think it'll take another 10 years for people to come up with a plan. And then basically it'll just be demolition by neglect. And that's something that the area doesn't want. We met with the stakeholders, with the residents, the majority of people want it open. And the question is, how soon can you do it? So if we finalize everything by the end of this year, so if we finalize the litigation with the city by the end of this year, we submit our permits, we actually have it built by January 2025. That's its 98th year. And we have 2 years to prepare for its 100-year anniversary.
The 100-year anniversary, which I think would be really nice and a great way to celebrate its 100 year. But I think again for me, and I think most people just really want to see something happen. And I think so it would be really nice to get that.
Well, and it's and one of the things that we've tried to explain to people, and listen, this is a very emotional issue. There's people who remember going there. And they remember it a particular way, and it's difficult for them to imagine it differently, right? There's a lot of nostalgia involved in it, and what is historic to them, right? So we're restoring the original Playhouse. Some people feel that the addition in the back, is historic to them. That being said, there's an entire generation of Miamians that have been deprived of the Playhouse. So my kids, your kids, they don't know what we're talking about. That's just a dead kind of building that actually is kind of an eyesore. And most people, when they drive by it, they're like, "What is this hot mess?"
And it doesn't fit the aesthetic of Coconut Grove and the vibrance of Coconut Grove. And if you go to Coconut Grove on a Sunday morning or Saturday morning, I mean, there's people biking and walking their dogs and standing in line to get a seat at Green Street. Or it's popping and it's alive and it's very vibrant. And then you go one block over, and there's this ghost town of a building that just it really is it kills the vibe.
Yeah. So stay tuned for the second part where we're going to talk about all the great things that we're doing in the Playhouse. The Gable Stage, which is going to be Grove Stage, does a lot of Shakespeare, but we're adding a lot of cool things, and we're going to be talking about it. A lot of it involves young kids, really bringing them, to the Playhouse, educational programming, bringing in the schools, and kind of taking theater to the next generation, but also focusing on the history of the Playhouse. One of the things that this plan has is an homage to Charlie Cinnamon, who I loved. Charlie Cinnamon started the Playhouse. He actually, the Coconut Grove Arts Festival, he hung clotheslines from the Playhouse and hung art. So we're actually going to have an installation every year to celebrate, his decision to do that.
Love Charlie Cinnamon.
Yeah.
We're when we were in the Grove, we were just 2 blocks from Charlie's Woods, where where after he passed, and they dedicated that to the Four Corner Park Zone over there. So we were there.
So we're creating a movie that's going to talk about the history of the Playhouse, but really, I mean, we need to open it and let a new generation in, and give the older generation who has this nostalgia about it an opportunity to share this space with the newer generation.
Well, I hope everybody comes together and makes that happen, that we don't wind up tabling it for another 10 years. Shifting gears a little bit, let's talk about the septic to sewer conversions. So for those of you that are not familiar, Miami-Dade has various different cities and municipalities within it, and some neighborhoods are on city sewage. You flush the toilet and it goes off into the city sewage, and it's not your problem. But many of the houses you might buy, my house included in Coral Gables,
oh no, you have a septic tank.
is on a septic tank. Mine is a very new septic tank. It's only 4 years old, whereas like many of them are 50 years old. And that's one of the things that we always guide our buyers. And when they're looking at a house, you know, it's not just a general inspection. It's about understanding cast iron pipes versus PVC plumbing, understanding whether or not it has a septic and if that septic's in good condition. So you have to pump it out, you have to inspect it. You know, those are things that we go to look for.
So a lot of news in the world of septic tanks. For those of you that know me, you know that I've been fixated with this topic for years. I was actually talking about septic tank when I ran for mayor in 2016, and people were like, what? Nobody really wanted to deal with the septic tank issue back then. And then we did the Biscayne Bay report. And when we had the Biscayne Bay task force, one of the findings was that one of the pollutants, you know, to the bay and to our one water system were these septic tanks. So as part of that report, we received all this information about the septic tank. And more importantly, to your point about the age of the septic tank, we have a lot of septic tanks that have ruptured a long time ago, and people don't even know. You know, because if it doesn't back up, they don't know it's broken. Mm-hmm. So, you know, we had this report, we had all these different reports on the septic tanks, where the septic tanks are, what districts are they in. The commissioner that has the most septic tanks is John Monestein. I have the second, you know, so I've been talking about different things that we can do. We also have wells. So we're getting rid of the wells in Pinecrest now. We're dealing with some in South Miami, but wells are also a problem because people don't necessarily have the information to ensure that their water quality is good. And most of the people that have wells also have septic tanks. The septic tanks leak into the wells, and that's a whole other issue. So right now, what have we done to date? Well, in this last budget, I actually created a reserve for septic to sewer, which is $170 million. We requested matches from the state of Florida. So the idea is to duplicate that and to use it for these septic to sewer conversions. To your point about the disclosures, Commissioner Higgins actually brought an item to the board that was approved, that now all buyers will have to sign off that they've been informed that there is a septic tank and that they've been given information on the septic tank. We didn't go as far as to require an inspection, but that's in the works. That's something that we've been talking about for a very long time. But at least now, as opposed to just having it in the general contract, there is going to be a rider in Miami-Dade County that forces a disclosure of a septic tank. Now, one of the items that I brought was information is now being collected by the auditor in terms of septic tanks and wells. And all that information is going to be double checked and then added to the property appraiser's website. So now the property appraiser, when you pull up a property, in your case, it will say that it has a septic tank. And since your septic tank is 4 years old, that means that your septic tank has a permit. So it will have a link to the state of Florida permit that you were given that was also approved by DERM, stating the year and the brand and all the information on your septic tank.
On the property appraiser's website. So full transparency. Which we're a big fan of in real estate. It's our expression. We say disclose, disclose, disclose. You know?
Right. And the same thing with the wells. If you have a well, it's going to be on there also. And there's going to be information. And that does not include, so it's also going to say if the well is being used to provide water to the property or if it's just being used for agricultural purposes. So if you have access to water, you can obviously, people are keeping their wells, but they're for ag, not for the water use. Because one of the things that we explain to folks in Pinecrest and in other areas, when the electricity goes out, you can't get water from your well. And most people don't know that. So that's a whole other issue. So now all that information is going to be on the property appraiser's website. And now yesterday, I passed an item on the 40-year inspection where all the inspections are also going to be collected, sorted, double checked, and put on the property appraiser's website. So for our condo friends, you know, that's also going to be on there because there's a lot of questions about it. But back to septic to sewer, we're working on creating benefit districts. And we're going to be rolling that out soon so that people have the opportunity, similar to what we did with the wells, to get rid of their septic tanks.
And what does it mean to the homeowner? And in case anybody's not familiar, and believe it or not, there are many buyers that come from other states that just don't know what septic tanks are. You flush the toilet, instead of it going out the pipes into a city sewer, it goes into a tank underground that's buried, that you never see, that you have to maintain and clean and flush out, depending on your family size and usage, every 2 to 5 years or so. Maybe as long as 7, but you know, every few years or so, you're going to have to flush that out and clean it. And it's not terribly expensive, but it is something you have to be mindful of. And again, when they erupt or they erode for being old, that can cause all kinds of biohazard problems for many other purposes.
Right. They also limit your use of your property. So where you have your septic tank, you can't do anything else.
Yeah,
you can't put anything else. Right. You have to keep it like clean. You know, we have issues with folks, you know, like the gardener won't know and they'll put something up on the septic tank and then you'll have a part of it like collapsing, you know, or someone doesn't know it's there and they'll put, you know, we had a case recently with a trampoline, you know, and they moved the trampoline into like that area and that didn't end well.
And so is this an agenda or what are we talking about here? Does this mean that throughout the county that there's going to be a large push for converting all old septics to sewer?
Right.
And what does that mean for homeowners or home buyers? Does that come with an expense, or is the county funds of 170 million and the state funds going to cover that?
So what we're looking at is something similar to what we did with the wells in Pinecrest and we're doing in South Miami, right? So there is government funding that's going to come in and put in part of the infrastructure on the street, right? So there is, depending on where you are, there's certain areas in Coral Gables that maybe what you need is a lateral, you know, in an area like Pinecrest where everyone is on septic. That's a much, much bigger project because you need pump stations, you need the mains, you need the laterals. That's an entire city.
And they got to go tear up road by road and redo.
Right.
Which is, I can see how that's going to aggravate.
It's a big job. It's a big job. It's a big job. But you also, you know, get, depending on where the septic tank is, you get the use of that. And what we're seeing now is that if you get rid of your septic tank, your property value does go up because it's one less thing that people have to worry about. Like, I don't have to worry about the septic tank anymore. I just turn on the water, flush the toilet, I'm done here.
Yeah.
Right. But we are going to eventually eliminate most septic tanks. We're not going to eliminate all septic tanks. And that's because there's certain areas where the county will not put lines. There's rural areas where we do not want to put mains into, where what we're going to recommend are these fiberglass septic tanks that are actually connected to electricity, and they have a motor and a system that moves the waste and ensures that if there is a leak or a rupture, there's an alarm and we find out about it, and that way we're not contaminating the area around the septic tank. So that, you know, if you're not from here, you know, to explain to folks, you know, when you grow up in Miami, you know, you learn about our aquifer and our water basin. And the problem that we have with septic tanks is that our water is right under us. So when you have a septic tank, even if it has a small leak, it's leaking into that aquifer and it's being maintained in that limestone and it's contaminating the entire system. So we have to prioritize it. Right now, Miami-Dade County is under a federal decree for not maintaining water quality. We're working on 2 more projects in order to get out of that. And then our next one is a state problem that we have with ocean outfall, which we're ending. And that's going to be millions of dollars, but that's in the budget. And we're hopefully taking care of that in the next year and a half to comply. But that's the practice of taking septic water, cleaning it, and then putting it out to the ocean. So right now what we're doing is we're creating these deep water injection wells. We're cleaning the water and then we're injecting it and then it comes up through the aquifer. But we're also looking at retaining some of that water and reusing it. We have a project now with FPL where we're taking our cleaned old water and they're using it instead of using, you know, water that hasn't been treated. So there's a lot of different water projects. Septic to sewer is just one of them. But it's going to take a few years. And the way that we're gonna do it is the government will put in a piece and the homeowner will put in a piece, but the homeowner piece gets spread out over 20 to 30 years.
Got it. So, and you can spread it out over 20, 30 years. And then if I go to sell that house later,
it runs with the land.
It would stick with the land so so I can either pay it up front or the next homeowner can absorb it within their tax bill.
Exactly.
All right. And how long, just to wrap up that topic, what is the timeline looking like on, and I'm assuming it's in phases, but from beginning to end?
Well, we're starting with the tanks that we know have failed, that are most impacting our water system. So there's actually about 1,090 tanks that we know have failed. And those are the ones that we need to take lines to as soon as possible. And then we're also working with these special benefit areas to see what areas are interested in getting rid of theirs. And one of the items that I passed this week is about finding the land for those pump stations. So once we find the land for those pump stations, we're going to build the districts around those pump stations and then send out that information. You also are going to get information in the mail and by email about your septic tank, because one of the things that I brought to the board that was approved is a well and septic tank education program. So now you're going to learn all about your septic tank.
All the pros, the cons,
all the pros, the cons, and the impacts that it has on the environment.
And so if it's all right, I think we've reached our technical 30 minutes, but if it's all right, we're going to go with a bonus 5 to 10 minutes here, because there is a topic that I definitely want to cover. And I receive a lot of questions about, especially from people that are future residents of Miami, people that are current condo owners. We all remember not too recently the sad collapse of the building in Surfside, the Champlain Tower building, which touched home for a lot of Miami residents. I know 3 different families and several people that I know personally who perished in that tragedy. And obviously, we all have a lot to learn from what happened over there. But a lot of people have concerns. Is it safe to live in my building? If I live in a building from 1955 or 1985, should I be moving out? What changes to legislation in terms of the 40-year recertification, which is, correct me if I'm wrong, but in Miami-Dade County, after the first 40 years of a building being built, it needs to be inspected from an engineer and recertified to say that it's safe. In many cases, they come up with a laundry list of items that need to be fixed, and then those either get, those in theory get taken care of, and then what is it, every 10 years after that? And so we're revisiting that. We're revisiting the processes for it, the accountability for it. And so, if you could answer some of those and talk to those, and again, speaking to the people that, is it safe to live in buildings? Is it safe to buy in a building? Should I not be buying because I'm going to get hit with a large assessment because of a new regulation? Those are some of the topics that I have, and my clients have questions about. But if you could tell us, because I know you're the spearhead on most of this stuff.
Right. So one of the first things that we did at the Board of County Commissioners was kind of decide that we were going to get information from the industry, because what we didn't want to do was start making changes without the support of the industry, right? So we wanted to hear from those industry experts. And then remember, the 40-year is a South Florida anomaly. This only exists in Miami-Dade and Broward. There are several investigations into the collapse of Champlain Towers, right? And I think that, for the most part, that's just a perfect storm and a series of bad events that, coincided to create that tragedy. What we found since then, so the very beginning, we got all these calls from residents asking for the 40 years. So the first problem was, where's the inspection? This was like the first problem. Where's the inspection? Did I pass it? I called my condo association. No one's telling me, right? There was this mad rush to figure out who was on first. So that's why we focused our early efforts, and we approved it actually this week, on providing people with that information. So instead of getting an operator at 311 that tells you, well, you got to go to the Coral Gables, got to go to the Coral Gables website and see the permit. I don't know, and then asking people to navigate those sites and find it. We're actually going to be collecting all that information under the Miami-Dade Building Department, again, ensuring that it is correct, and then posting it on the property appraiser site. So the same thing, because most people, where's the first place that they go? To the property appraiser site.
Everybody's going to Miami-Dade.gov and they're looking.
Yeah, and they're calling the property appraiser, by the way, who's like, I don't have your inspections or your permits. I'm not that guy. I just do deeds. So
and again,
that's
disclosure and transparency, I think, is where everything starts.
Right. So we're starting with that. We also passed an item that I brought, asking the state to create a statewide repository of documents, for condo docs, so that people can get more information. And then we're going to share with them these inspections, so that way they can have both on another separate state site, because we think that the more the merrier. And then we had these subcommittee meetings that are still ongoing. And if you want to learn more about them, you can go on the Miami-Dade Gov website. You can go to my subcommittee and you can actually see experts speak on what they're seeing in the field. Now, what's interesting is before we even get to the 40-year, Citizens Property Insurance insures 85% of the condominiums in Miami-Dade County that are over 40 years. Okay. So I started talking about Citizens and insurance before, like my peers were like, oh, the 40-year. I was like, no, we got to call the insurance companies because they move faster than us, right? So what we're seeing right now is that Citizens in particular and other insurance companies are requiring a 20-year inspection. And they're not approving without a 20-year inspection, and they're sending folks to do the actual inspection themselves. So they're hiring a third party to go in and do the inspections. And if you don't have the work done, they're not insuring you. Now, this is changing dramatically what's happening in condo associations because what you cannot have a condo building that is uninsured. So we're already seeing kind of a race to hire structural engineers, a race to get this work done. And associations are really moving quickly because they realize that if they don't resolve this issue, that they're not going to have insurance. So that's what's happening in the world of the insurance market with condominiums. Now in Tallahassee, we're working with them as we wrap up, this subcommittee to provide them with real information about what we're finding. We did an audit of our buildings. We're getting it from the cities. How long did it take people to do these inspections? If we're going to move up the date, are we going to move it up because we believe that the life of concrete is different, or because it took people 7 years to do the work? So that's kind of the other thing that we're looking at. So we've done the math on how long it takes. And we believe that if you move it up to 30, you'll probably get a better result, not necessarily because of the material, but because of the time that it takes people to do this work.
The bureaucracies of it too. I mean, in many buildings, they'll do an inspection. They find out that there's some work that's necessary. Other people come and say, no, that engineering report is wrong. They want to order a second one. The building has to litigate and figure that out internally.
Right. So to that point, one of the recommendations that we got from Peter Iglesias, who's the manager of the city of Coral Gables, who is actually a structural engineer and his background is in unsafe. He's part of a group that includes Miami-Dade County, where we've been meeting with these experts. And one of his recommendations was, and we agree with him, is that now we're going to change the law at the state level so that whenever a report is done by a structural engineer and they find that there is a life safety issue, they no longer just give it to the association. They have the obligation to give it to the building department. So that way the clock starts. So the association could do whatever it wants. They can fight about it until the cows come home, but the building department is coming for you because now they got this. And we've actually had 6 buildings already in Miami-Dade County that have been evacuated because they didn't meet their inspections. And instead of sending it to unsafe, which is what happened pre-Surfside, the building department would have been like, I'm sending you to unsafe structures. You have to go to the hearing. You have to figure it out over there. Building department is saying, absolutely not. Evacuate those people. Get them out. And we've been dealing with placement of those people through the homeless trust, which has nothing to do with displaced buildings, right? Which is another issue that we're dealing with at the county. So we still have a few more subcommittees. We're working on a few more things. So if you're interested in that, you can go on our website and see those meetings and hear directly from a lot of these experts, including property managers, structural engineers, architects, about what they're seeing in the field. Engineers are the next meeting, which is going to be interesting.
Amazing. But I guess, is there a task force designated to making sure that buildings are right now currently are safe?
The Florida Bar has a group that's working on that. And the state is working on an omnibus bill. And what they've asked the different counties to do is to come up, with suggestions so that they can pass an omnibus bill similar to what they did with Parkland. The reason that we're not 100% on having a task force is because task force take usually 2 to 3 years to actually be embanked, meet, and have recommendations. And no one's going to wait that long. If we wait 3 years, like a million changes will happen. By the time those people make their recommendations, it won't happen. And a lot of the folks in the industry, like the structural engineers and the contractors, they said, look, we don't want to sit around for 2 years and talk about this. We're making changes now. We're demanding changes now. So that's kind of where we're at.
All right. And then a lot of these changes that come down the pipe will likely, if buildings are required to undergo more extensive more extensive engineering inspections, they're likely to then come with extra costs to these unit owners and assessments. And so to answer, I guess the question is, are people going to be on the receiving end of these?
It depends on the maintenance of the building, right? So if you have, and we have found older buildings that have been properly maintained and they don't have any issues, so it depends on if you've been maintaining your building, if you've been doing the work, if you have issues with water. One of the things that we keep seeing are problems with dewatering, problems with seawalls. Water corrodes concrete, right? And we know that. So parking, the state of where the parking is, the placement of the parking, how well it was maintained, the loads on that. A lot of these older buildings too, if a lot of them have been remodeled. So if you live in a building that, in 1960 had a linoleum kitchen, right? And now everybody comes in and puts quartz. Like how much weight is that going to put, on the foundation? So these are the things that we're talking about with the engineers to try to figure out, the loads and what to do.
It's complex. And so I think again, it becomes down to a case by case basis on the health of the building, how well it's managed and maintained. I think a lot of real estate brokers, that if you find a broker who knows specific areas or works in specific buildings, they tend to have a lot of knowledge about what's going on there, but you can't necessarily rely on those guys. But what I do like to say is, and again, for me, I've always found they're really good indicators, right? You look for clues, right? When I go to a building and I'm asking for the condominium documents, the bylaws, rules and regulations, frequently asked questions and financial statements, just to do our general due diligence of a condo purchase. When they make me go to the building to pick it up and they have to print it out and give it to me in a manila envelope, and then they charge me $100 to do it,
that's
it's
a bad start.
It's not a great indicator,
start.
right? But if I contact the building, they have a great property management company who gets back to me and returns phone calls and sends me a link to their website where I can download the documents on the fly. I think those are not surefire bets, but really good indicators of
and things that
how
people,
well things are managed and run.
100%. And I think things that people should ask for now is, who's doing the maintenance work? Can I see those contracts? Were they general contractors? How long did it take for the board to approve that? When did you do the balconies? What are you doing in terms of the parking? What is your strategy for retaining water? Do you have pumps? Do you have issues? Like, these are all questions that now the average person can ask for documentations on. So I think we're going to be seeing a lot more of that. And the more responsive that a condominium is, probably the better shape it is. The other thing that we've seen kind of anecdotally, which I think is interesting, looking at all these buildings and how long it took them to comply, is that the buildings that have the greater percentage of owners living in the building are in better shape.
Oh yeah. No, that's. I mean,
because they're in the building.
I mean, the lenders know it too. If there's too many, if your ratio is off between owner occupant or investor owned units, like many lenders won't even give you the money because they know that some foreign unit owner somewhere who doesn't care really what's going on in the building, he just wants to make sure that he gets his rent check every month.
Doesn't want
to spend more money, doesn't want to do more maintenance because he's just going to turn it over for profit and sell it. Less likely to care about what's going on in that building.
An interesting fact too, I think almost all of the buildings, all of the buildings that have been evacuated because they've had issues post Surfside, all of them are rental buildings.
Unreal. Well, we are beyond out of time. We were supposed to be a 30-minute show. Obviously, we could sit here with Commissioner Regalado for hours on end. She's a wealth of knowledge and really. I don't know how you keep it all in your head. You're covering a lot of ground, a lot of topics, and we've only skimmed the surface of it. We didn't even get to 2 topics on my list today, so
we can do it again.
We will have to have you back.
Happy to do it.
Anything? Where can you be reached or anything?
Sure. So the easiest thing is to follow me on social media. It's very easy. It's Raquel Regalado on Twitter, Raquel A. Regalado on Instagram, and Raquel Regalado on Facebook. And then you can go to our website at the county. We have a newsletter. You can sign up for it. You can email us if you have any questions. It's district7@miamidade.gov. I have an amazing staff. You come see us too. Anything that you need, we're here to help.
Thank you for being here. And again, my name is Levi Meyer. I want to thank you for joining us, Commissioner Regalado, and for the Miami Community's newspaper for hosting this on the on Facebook.com/community newspapers. Again, this is Miami Living with Levi, and we look forward to joining us on our next episode.
Thank you.